Right. So we're following on from a conversation that was really marked on health, but science discovery and technology. One theme that came up in the conversation was mindset and how we expect to live much longer, how we are going to manage in societies. Likewise, with mindset, you need to look at how the world is managed differently with decentralized platforms. Now, for somebody that works usually in geopolitics, when you talk about decentralization, I'm thinking federalism, decentralized authorities, devolution of power. But actually, decentralization, when we think about organizations and how we are setting up systems, is not too far from that. So, Kerem, I'm going to start with you. What do we mean when we're talking about decentralized platforms?
Sure, thank you, and thanks everyone for coming. Without going into the technicalities of it, the way we envision, the way we think about a decentralized system is the difference between building a structure with pretty solid grounds and floors. On each floor, you know what's happening. There's a way to get in, there's a way to get out. There is significant rigidity in the system, and very unfortunately, I'm from Istanbul, I'm from Turkey, and as we've experienced over the past week and a half, rigid structures, when not done properly, are bound to collapse. Decentralization, on the other hand, promotes more of a garden metaphor. So cultivating a garden, rather than constructing a building, right? The verb is constructing, building, cultivating a garden. And what that means is building an ecosystem where seemingly disconnected, seemingly irrelevant even, components, whether it's plants, whether it's animals, insects, can come together in such a harmonious way. They have accountability towards each other, right? They need to make sure that system continues to evolve, continues to be strong and resilient. And they do their part. And as a result, we have a system that works in harmony and flourishes over time, and can withstand various challenges. So, anyways, didn't want to go into the more of the technicalities of what do we mean with blockchain or other systems. We don't even need to. I think it's, as you said, it's more of a mindset shift rather than a technological shift that we are talking about here. And so that's how we envision, how we imagine decentralization. As Neol, as well as the previous company I co-founded with my partner here, Engin, Atelier, which is a community-powered platform. So these communities and decentralized systems have been part of our journey for quite many years.
Ben, when we talk about decentralization and the way Kerem differentiates between constructing a building and cultivating a garden, how do you see, Web3 platforms, blockchain, but also this moving into an era where trust is built in decentralized systems, where for those who are coming in from the outside, it feels like, but who's really responsible?
Right. Well, I think this is kind of the fascinating thing that we're seeing in the Web3 world. On the one hand, you say, cryptocurrencies, the blockchain, it is meant to distribute authority. It's fail-safe. You've got all of these types of things built in. And then on the other hand, you see a collapse like FTX, right, which is one of the largest financial frauds in history. And it comes down to, I think, really three important components. Component number one is a technology in and of itself does nothing. A technology is an enabler, and you can implement it correctly, or you can implement it incorrectly, or you can do something in between. And so you have to understand that in order to have real transparency, you have to not only have the underlying infrastructure that enables it, but you actually have to create systems in place to ensure that transparency occurs and decentralization can be effective. So that's factor number one. Factor number two is nothing survives incentive. Incentive dominates everything. And so in order to ensure that a decentralized system can be effective, far more so than centralized controlled systems, you have to create incentive structures, not just at the end, but throughout the process that incentivize the kind of behaviors that decentralized systems will generate. And the third.
Sorry, but I just want to pick you up just on that point about the incentives. So are we talking things like tokens? What are you thinking when you say, or are you incentivizing the people that are working in that? Elaborate a bit on the incentives.
I think you have to look at it top to bottom. So for example, think of the FTX situation, right? The FTX situation, the incentive structure was make as much money as humanly possible in a completely unregulated free-for-all environment. The idea that FTX is the only fraud in the crypto world is absurd. It's full of fraud, right? Because the incentive structure is there to encourage people to take advantage of the system because they think they can get away with it. And there are many examples. The only woman on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list is somebody who is a cryptocurrency a promoter who didn't bother issuing a cryptocurrency. She just said, let me just create my own serial numbers. It's not on the blockchain. And she built people out of billions of dollars in investments, but she had no incentive to actually.
So the purpose and the incentive.
That's right.
Okay, and your third point before we lose it.
And the third is the regulatory environment. And in the previous panel, Roger, who by the way was the first governor of the Minerva Academy, so has been along with me in this Minerva journey for more than a decade now. Talked about the availability of these solutions, these health solutions all over the world, but the regulatory framework doesn't allow them to come forward. And the regulatory environment is more often than not one that encourages central planned the buildings as opposed to the ecosystems. And a little example, if you look historically, I come from the world of education. And in the world of education, if you look at the 19th century, 40 of the top 50 universities in the world were in Germany. Today, none out of the top 50 universities in the world are in Germany, and that's been the case for a long time. Germany is a highly centrally controlled environment. Build great universities, don't withstand the test of time, right? They inevitably are fragile in their perspective. The United States, which became to dominate the higher education landscape in the 20th century, had the exact opposite approach. Accreditation was really distributed down to various regions and then really to the institution, and created a framework that said, hey, you tell us what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then so long as you technically achieve it, then we will let you operate. And that enabled a massively interesting competitive environment in the 20th century. In the 21st century, that system is also starting to show its wear, primarily because the accreditation system has stopped looking at outcomes.
Right.
And what we're doing at Minerva is we're trying to create an ecosystem, actually that was anchored here in the UAE with Zayed University, which was the first institution that adopted a wholesale reform for interdisciplinary learning in the world. And we create these bespoke opportunities that are fit for purpose, but that share this kind of ecosystem that makes them more and more powerful.
But they have to have a backbone of an institution that you trust.
Correct.
So, for example, Minerva with Zayed, because Zayed has a history, people know what it is and so forth. But it also means, and Kerem, I want to ask you about this, is that there are those institutions that have a knowledge, a history, be it a consulting firm that has a very strong name, and so people feel like I can trust them. I know what they're doing. They have a track record.
Yeah.
So how do you tackle the fact that people want to see a track record that they know, and they also want to preserve what they know? So there's that. If we're talking about mindset, there's that struggle. How do you convince them?
So what we are building with Neol is a decentralized, a community-powered. More than, I think we can forget about the whole decentralization, crypto parts of it, but really a community-powered version of a talent network, right? And really, when you think about what a consultancy, any company brings to the table is a few things. One is a track record, but what is a track record? Is the track record of all the individuals that are part of that organization, right? When you work with a McKinsey-like company, they say, we've done a similar type of work elsewhere in the world. Well, guess what? There's a bunch of people who did that work somewhere else in the world. So those individuals are the ones that actually hold that track record.
Right. It's the brain trust.
It's the brain trust, exactly. If you think about a system like a school or a learning mechanism, it's the mentor-mentee relationship, right? It can be happening under the umbrella of the system, or it can be happening in a decentralized setting. Because once again, the mentor is bringing their own credibility, their own background, their own passions, their own values into that system. Whether they are under X or Y, or they are in a part of a network or of a community, it's the same. When we think about, how do I go after a challenge that is far above and beyond my own reach, right? I need a team around me. So I need to be able to trust other people. I need to be able to bring other voices into the conversation. The kinds of challenges that are fed to these organizations today, from the climate crisis to the food crisis to mental health to other things, cannot be solved by buildings, right? By those structures where, information and know-how and intelligence is within the boundaries of the system. However, we believe they can actually be tackled if the right platform exists, which is what we are building with Neol. They can be tackled by the individuals who are passionate about the challenge, who have the expertise, who are willing to go out of their way to find the people and bring them into the conversation, find the organizations and bring them into the conversation to solve and tackle some of these mega challenges that aren't here for a few years, right? Food crisis isn't a challenge that you do a 3-month project on and then you move on, right? Climate crisis is going to be with us for the rest of our lives at least. It's not going to be something we solve in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. So building these systems of coming together in unique, novel ways, with structures, of course. I am talking about structures of bringing these people together, and how are we actually, innovating on those, to me, is the only way forward.
And maybe just to build on that point, which is really important, because something is decentralized, it doesn't mean it's chaos, right? It's decentralization isn't about, okay, now you let people do whatever they want and all the rest. You need that infrastructure. You need those structures. Exactly, and accountability. So both from the underlying enabling technology, the incentive structures that you build towards, right, that are natural, and the regulatory framework, you have to have that environment to enable decentralized systems to thrive.
And to the point you made about transparency, and so that the systems are there, but also transparent, and people can see it to trust it.
And shared values, like Minerva, I think, is a great example of, to me, I've been telling Ben, I've been following Minerva from the very early days. And how do we build these systems? When you think about that building, right? When people walk into that building and out of that building, are they really going in with shared values and walking out with shared values? Some maybe not. Some may not even know what the shared values are, right, in that system. Whereas when you start to think about these more distributed, community-powered, decentralized thinking systems, shared values have to be at the core. And that's what drives transparency, that's what drives accountability, that's what drives diversity, inclusion, and all the other things.
But I want to pick up yes, I agree on shared values, but you also need a culture of an institution or a group or so forth. So building that culture
Right.
also requires that you're joining something. If you're new, because what I'm thinking about is, and I want to pick up on the theme of you bring people who have expertise in this, who have a track record. But when you're a fresh graduate or somebody who's 18 looking for a job, you don't have that. So you get the experience and you get the so-called kudos by attaching yourself to an institution. How would you respond to that?
Once again, what's the difference between you attaching yourself to an institution where, let's say, you have 3 people that you report to or that you work with, versus attaching yourself to a network where, again, there's 3 incredible people in the network that are looking out for you, that are your mentors, that are responsible for your future path, that are responsible for identifying with you what kind of projects you are a great fit for, that help you get to that next phase of your life. I believe we can deconstruct a lot of, and by the way, I'm a believer in organizations. I'm a believer in all the ways these organizations have evolved to what they are. My big provocation is, how can we deconstruct certain elements in them? Like, for example, bringing a young voice into a company, into an organization, and giving them the roadmap that they deserve. How do we do that in a talent network? How do we do that in a decentralized network? Well, then it comes to incentives. If I'm responsible for someone young's journey, then the incentive mechanism should be, if they go out and do amazing things, how do I benefit from it, right? I still send thank you notes to some of my professors in school, and that's my thank you to them. If there was an incentive mechanism built, let's say at Stanford, that said, if Kerem is about to go do X, Y, Z and change the world, you as the professors who have brought him to where he is, you get this. It might be financial, it might be just recognition, it might be anything. Right now it's a postcard. Right? That's what they
at best.
At best.
At best.
Or an email, a phone call, a WhatsApp message every now and then. So thinking about all these granular ways of thinking about these systems so it's not easy. You have to, when you deconstruct, it's like deconstructing an entire, a car. What kind of thing you're going to build with it. But it's fun, and we believe that's where the future is headed.
I like that you use the term deconstruct rather than disrupt, because most people think disruptors are just coming to mess about with what we're doing.
No, there's so much to learn from systems that are centralized, that have done great things, that have built, technologies and solutions and next system thinking. They have opened up the way to this. But I do believe we are in the beginning of an era where people are really following their own heart and gut and souls, and we just need to open up the pathway for those.
And Ben, it's interesting because the conversation is so human-centric, and yet most people will think, no, this is technology disrupting our lives, and it's actually taking away the human touch. So if we talk about, for example, Minerva's example, it really is about the people and the students and the educators. But from the outside, it may appear, well, actually, it just means we're doing everything online and there's no human interaction.
Yeah, I think that when we wrote a book a few years ago about Minerva and how we built it and all the rest, and when it came time to give the book a title, I of course wanted to be more radical, and the publisher didn't like that. But we settled on a moniker I came up with which was Building the Intentional University. Nothing works without intentionality, and intentionality is fundamentally human. And if you think about a technology as the driver of a process, or even data, people talk about being data-driven. We are proudly not data-driven. We're mission-driven. We're data-informed, right? You have to be informed by the data. You have to be informed by the technology. You have to be informed by the incentive structure. You have to be informed by the regulatory environment. But you have to be driven by purpose and intention. And once you do that, and once you anchor to mission, once you anchor to the goal that you're trying to get to, then building systems that look different, that are more resilient, that are more effective is second nature.
Can I ask what you wanted to call the book?
I wanted it to be called Reformation. And they were worried that it would be a religious text. And I explained to them it is a religious text.
Okay. Well, I think the Intentional University is a good title. Kerem, last words as we wrap up here. You mentioned climate and you mentioned complex problems that need to have an ecosystem working with it. Do you see what you're building and what you're trying to work on as creating a new ecosystem, a new realm, or reforming from within?
Both. One, as I said, I do believe in existing structures and their use cases. And so many of our partners, clients, are actually organizations that are within buildings, to go back to the metaphor. And we need those very much. We need to embed a new mindset in them so that they trust these more seemingly unstructured, but actually quite structured systems. Because at the end of the day, once again, who is in that room, delivers everything, right? So if we can have the right group of people in the room with the right background, with the right mindset, with the right ambition, we believe we can make the kind of impact that is impossible by some of the legacy systems. But we do need the legacy systems to be partners along the journey.
Legacy institutions have a choice. They either embrace the reforms that keep them relevant and at the forefront, or then they will be disrupted by those that do.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for your insights. Thank you for your time, and thank you all for attending. Please, some appreciation for our speakers.
Thank you.